You work-wearers constantly bring in nothing but soiled pennies. I take it that you're just a lethargic jerk meandering around in the middle of the day to make yourself wait until the end. You poor loser, you should be thankful that we're even processing your things. Scum, just wait and sit quietly. The bank clerk uttered those things to me and looked at me like he spotted something filthy. In a haste, I had left my job at a construction site and gone to the bank street still wearing my work clothes. But it's been more than 3 hours since I arrived to the bank. My turn never seems to come, even though people who arrived after me have been called up one after another. Is it possible that my work clothing are causing me to get pushed to the back of the line? Although it's common for people to make snap judgments about others based just on their appearance, isn't that quite another matter entirely? Branch manager Mr. Smith emerged from the back room as I was ready to reply. My goodness. The man who had been watching me with disdain till now opened his eyes in astonishment when Mr. Smith bowed courteously to me. Who is this person? You mean you don't know? Mr. Smith's face became pale as he told the bank clerk who I was. I'm 21-year-old Scott Anderson. When I was younger, I can still recall feeling hollow whenever my classmates talked about their aspirations for the future. Though their paths had already been predetermined, they were full of hope and wanted to pursue their passions. My classmates who openly shared their aspirations, stating that they wanted to be this or achieve that, made me jealous. Not that I had a dream in particular, but I detested not being free to follow my own course. In addition, my dad was obstinate and possessing a craftsman-like quality. He yelled, "You fool," when I joked that I wanted to work for the company on a daily basis. You are a member of our family. Recognize your location. It felt so boring, having everything planned out for me. The individuals who talked about dreams around me and my parents, who imposed their ambitions on me, were aspects of that life that I detested. I thus began to have a difficult life. My parents' remarks had grown aggravating by the time I was in high school, and I turned to fighting as a release valve for my annoyance. I started to get treated like a ticking time bomb by people, and occasionally I even got into difficulty with the law. My parents would sternly chastise me every time I was called in, which would make me resist and feed a vicious cycle of resentment and hatred. Our family dynamic deteriorated at that time as my parents began to argue more and wondered why they had failed in their parenting of me. My grandparents lived nearby, and since I detested being at home, I frequently crashed at their place. I used to spend most of my childhood days there while my parents were at work. I used to hang out with Grandma after school, and we would have dinner together when Grandpa got home. Before leaving for home, I would frequently complete my homework there and take a bath with Grandpa. Perhaps for that reason, I will always harbor affection for my grandparents. Above all, they didn't bug me as much as my parents did. They treated me like their cherished grandson, Scott, even when I started to look scruffy. Grandpa would say, "Scott is a good boy," as if that were his slogan, and Grandma was always kind. What's so good about me? They would merely give me a friendly grin, even after I bluntly and shamefully voiced such. No matter how wild I got, I never crossed the line into truly horrible behavior, and I believe that's because of them. I thought about moving in with them when I graduated from high school to help them out. If it meant helping my grandparents, I even started to consider becoming a caregiver. Then one day, as usual, my phone began vibrating in my pocket as I was hanging out with my pals in an alley. I initially believed it to be a message, but as the vibration persisted, I understood it to be a call. I looked at the screen out of frustration, and Grandma's name was there. Grandma had trouble using computers and would frequently ask for help with even the slightest tasks, like typing a message. I took my time answering the phone, assuming she was asking me to pick up something. "Hello." "Grandma, what's for dinner tonight?" On the other end of the call, Grandma sounded terrified, in stark contrast to my relaxed tone. Her voice was so crazy, I had never heard her so calm and gentle before. She said, in response to my question about what was wrong, "Grandpa has collapsed." Grandma gave me the hospital's name and hung up, claiming she had to call someone else. I was stunned and speechless. I had no idea what the heck was going on. Had Grandpa fallen apart? When my disoriented brain eventually processed the circumstances, I bounded off from my current location. Since I was a student at the time, I never even considered using a taxi. I just ran through the streets, panting and soaked with perspiration, giving it everything I had. And last, I arrived in the hospital room. A chill went down my spine the instant I saw Grandpa laying there in the bed, feeble and lifeless. Even from a distance, it was obvious that his normally vibrant and humorous face appeared pale and unwell. He had many tubes strapped to every part of his body, and his throat wheezed with each breath. Grandpa. He flashed me a feeble smile as I hurried to his bedside. Oh, Scott. He attempted to raise his hand, but it hardly moved before tumbling weakly back into the bed. I held both of his hands tenderly. Grandpa's hand quivered a little, but he did not reclaim the grip. Don't look so sad, Scott. Grandpa, please don't. I couldn't bring myself to say, please don't go. Scott, what a kind boy you are. My delight and pride, Grandpa remarked, grinning broadly. I shook my head, though. I was a disappointing grandchild, not a good boy. Do as you please with your life. Treasure it. I had no words to reply to what Grandpa had said. Later, Grandpa had already gone into a coma when my parents hurried to the hospital. I went to see him every day, but every day he got weaker. He had worked as a carpenter, so his arms had once been strong, but now they were as thin as twigs. I prayed to God, something I had never done before, while holding his wrinkly hand. Please, just please, let Grandpa heal. I swear that I will never longer pick battles. I'll return home. I promise to be a good boy. Grandpa deserves my entire happiness, so please, God, keep him safe. However, my prayers were answered, and Grandpa died peacefully. It was only after his retirement that I found out about his cardiac issues. He was becoming older, his health had gotten worse, and he finally went away quietly. My parents, Grandma, and I shed many tears. Grandpa was extremely loved by all of us, and we were all devastated by his passing. It was difficult for me to go to Grandpa's house after the funeral. It hurt because I would have to face the fact that Dad was really gone if I went there. I was floating through life without purpose and without motivation one day when Grandma called, and I went to their house for the first time in a very long time. I was unfamiliar with the new altar that had appeared in the living room. Grandma pulled out some work clothes and gave them to me. I found a brand new uniform with the name Anderson stitched on the chest when I unwrapped them. In addition, my dad's construction company wore this attire. My dad was the sole founder of the company, which Grandpa created. I detested it and had always struggled against Dad's continual insistence that I take control. Grandpa had often reassured me, Scott, you don't have to take over, when he saw my resistance. Follow your desires. But Grandma gazed at the picture on the altar with longing. In the hopes that I would wear it someday, he prepared it in secret. Though he knew I didn't want to take over, he had nonetheless quietly made the preparation shopping that I would eventually wear the same outfit. Grandpa had a bright, pleased smile on his face and was dressed in his work clothes in the memorial portrait. He appeared really cool and proud. Grandma, I have decided. I'm going to turn into a stylish craftsman who fits well in these outfits. I made the decision to quit running away from having my life dictated to me and to stop making excuses. I wanted to follow up with Dad and Grandpa because I knew they both took tremendous pride in this work. I chose to work at the family construction company after having that thought. I let my blonde hair grow out and shaved it off as soon as I came home. Grasping the labor clothing Grandpa had laid out, I asked Dad straight, please let me work. I stated something out of the blue, shocking both my parents because I had been rebelling all along. I told Dad what I really wanted to do, how I felt about taking over the construction company, and about the work clothing Grandpa had given me. But Dad was never going to agree to it. I kept pleading with him to let me work even after he refused, since I knew it wouldn't be easy. I vowed today that I would not stop asking till tomorrow and the day after until I was finally accepted. I pondered the duration of the back and forth. Dad finally sighed and said, "You'll start by getting to know the site," and I bowed profoundly. I started working at the construction company the following day, as my father had instructed. I worked at the construction site for my first job. Obviously, without any particular abilities, loading materials was the majority of my responsibilities. I was viewed like a burden at first because I wasn't helpful at all, and news quickly got around that I was the CEO's son. I received daily reprimands for being a bothersome employee from the senior staff due to the rigid structure. To be really honest, there were moments when I wanted to give up because things were difficult, but I forced myself to hold on every time I saw Grandpa's face. I attempted to study as much as I could and did everything I could. I was progressively given more responsibilities as those days went on, and the more experienced employees started to notice me. At last, the day of my very first paycheck came. I had never worked part-time jobs before, so I was a little excited. My father made fun of me and said, "Don't expect too much. It's not a big amount." But that was more than sufficient for me. I had promised Grandma that I would take her out to supper, and I wanted to tell Grandpa that I had received my first salary. Fortunately, I had an early shift that day and was allowed to leave before noon, so I made my way straight to the bank. With plenty of time before my scheduled supper with Grandma, I made the decision to give her a surprise gift. I made the decision to go to the bank and withdraw my paycheck before heading home to change clothes so that it would be out of the way. The bank's ATMs and counters were packed because it was payday, although there was a long line outside for the ATMs. I chose to take a number and wait as it appeared like I could wait at the desk. There weren't many people in line in front of me, and it was shortly after lunch. I had assumed that I could return home and leave in an hour or so. I waited to be called while using my phone in an empty seat. I kept myself busy by scrolling through social media and responding to messages, but my phone was not ringing. They were ringing numbers that came after mine, but the last time I looked, there were only 2 people ahead of me. I went over to a man who was working at the corner of the counter, wondering whether I had missed my turn somehow. "Excuse me, sorry to bother you. I think I might have missed my number." I showed him my slip of numbers. The man gave me a quick glance before quickly erasing his smile. After a brief phone check, he remarked dismissively, "We're calling numbers in order." "But my number has already passed," I replied. "Should I just keep waiting?" I asked since I didn't know how the bank counters operated. However, the man's sigh was tinged with frustration. He dropped his gaze back to the documents in front of him and stated, "The order of processing may change depending on the transaction details, so please wait at your seat." I had to look at his name tag since I was getting annoyed with his attitude. His chest was adorned with a plaque that said, "Stanley Kelly." It was payday, so I could understand why it was busy, but this kind of blatant behavior really got to me. I chose to wait a little while longer, hoping that I wouldn't have to deal with Stanley. I followed the instructions, and almost 10 numbers after mine had already been called, even though they claimed the order could alter. I had expected to hear from them shortly, but instead I was getting calls one by one from people who had received their number tickets after I had begun to wait. I opted to question the lobby receptionist since I hadn't heard back from Stanley in more than half an hour. The receptionist stepped behind the counter and said they would check. I had not been here for more than 2 hours. When the receptionist came back, I wouldn't have time to buy the gift I was considering if I didn't leave quickly and get ready. He bowed pitifully and stated, "We are currently very busy and ask for your patience to wait a little longer." I could have waited a little bit longer because of their courteous demeanor, in contrast to Stanley. I took a seat again and bided my time. Ultimately, though, I didn't get a call until the bank closed at 3:00 p.m. Only those who were waiting to be called stayed after the new reception was closed. I was treated as if I didn't exist even though no one else was in line for deposit withdrawals. It was unusual to have to wait 3 hours while the order was continually changing. There was still a long line outside the ATM, even though I should have just gone to the ATM. I went back to Stanley, reluctant to start over there. I apologize. I've been waiting for the past 3 hours. Will you be giving me a call soon? I believe it was you who instructed me to wait at my seat. I inquired. Stanley laughed mockingly and snorted. Probably simply a little change exchange, am I correct? It's inconvenient and bothersome during this hectic time. His tone had abruptly turned disdainful, and I was astonished. You work-wearing people always bring in filthy change. You can wait till the very end, you lazy bastards who like to meander around in the middle of the day. You poor fool, you should be thankful that we're even processing your things. You filth, just wait there silently. You bastard, what did you say? I yanked Stanley by the collar in a furious manner, and he gave a pitiful little cry. I nearly pumped my fist, but just then, Grandpa's face shot into my head. Scott is a decent boy. I dropped my fist in surprise. I apologized and let Stanley go. Stanley irritably cleared his throat. This is the reason I detest working with the lowest rung. They are so barbaric. Oh, how annoying it is to lose all reason and get emotional at any time. Not to mention, there was no money. What a catastrophe. Talking to someone who denigrated me like Stanley was useless. Probably aroused by the earlier disturbance, a man in a suit swiftly approached from behind the counter as I was considering asking someone else for assistance. The man, in a dapper suit, grinned broadly as soon as he noticed me. Well, if it's not an Anderson construction employee. Hey, Mr. Smith, nice to meet you again. It was this bank's highest-ranked employee, Mr. Smith, the branch manager. Now that someone I knew was here to talk, I experienced a sense of relief. Stanley's eyes widened in surprise as he witnessed our mutual greeting. Do you know this person, Mr. Smith? It was now Mr. Smith's turn to widen his eyes in surprise at Stanley's apprehensive question. This is the son of the firm Anderson Construction, with whom we collaborate closely. Were you unable to identify Anderson Construction's uniform? Tell me not to know, please. Mr. Smith responded, practically daring Stanley to admit his lack of knowledge. Stanley's complexion went white. Ha! The child. Scott, kindly come over here. Mr. Smith led the way and showed me to a room in the back. In the reception area, I took a seat on a lovely sofa and was given a cup of warm tea. I apologize for making you wait. What was it you and Stanley were talking about earlier? Mr. Smith apologized for his question. Stanley, who had accompanied me, sat opposite from me, next to Mr. Smith, and appeared to be quite uncomfortable. Sincerely, I mentioned that I had come in the early afternoon to take out money and had been purposefully kept waiting. I also talked about how my attire had made Stanley look down on me and how, in a fit of rage, I had grabbed him. Mr. Smith bowed so profoundly when I was done that his head almost touched the table. I sincerely apologize. This Stanley person had apparently only been moved here recently. It was wrong to alter his attitude because of a customer, even though it might be understood that he didn't know every one of them yet. Merely because someone is dressed for work does not give them the right to be looked down upon or judged. You're entirely correct, Scott. Mr. Smith bowed his head and said, We sincerely apologize. Stanley only looked down, expressionless and colorless. Stanley didn't even appear to be aware that he had acted improperly. All he appeared to be afraid of was getting in trouble and the repercussions. I'll be talking to my father about this incident, I said. Mr. Smith swiftly responded, Please, anything but that. At what I had just stated. I implore you to be forgiving. I truly apologize. Grandpa was still bowing, but thanks to his hard labor, the little construction company he had begun had expanded dramatically over the years. It had grown into a sizable company, Anderson Construction, capable of managing everything from public works projects to building projects. This neighborhood bank has been the principal business partner of our company since Grandpa's day. Even I was aware that the bank would suffer a significant loss if we ceased doing business with them. were proud of these workwear items. I found it impossible to forgive Stanley for treating them with such disdain. Please apologize to him, Stanley. I apologize profusely, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith and Stanley both bowed profoundly in regret. It all felt a bit silly at this point. That suffices. Please show the same respect to everyone who enters today, not just myself. However, I will still tell my father about what happened today. After putting the cash I had taken out into my wallet, I walked out of the bank. Following that, I was able to bring Grandma the gift, and we headed out to the meal that was scheduled. I got Grandpa and Grandma each a set of spectacles. One of the cups ended up at Grandpa's shrine. I was aware that they had continued to wear matching bows in secret as a couple. Grandpa and Grandma both cherished objects created by talented craftspeople. Thus, I thought these two artistically cut glasses in various colors would be ideal for them when I saw them. I figured that when I got old enough, I'd serve Grandpa's favorite liquor with this glass, since I still couldn't buy it. Grandma was overjoyed, and it gave me comfort to see her smile after all this time. As could be expected, Dad was incensed when I told him what had happened at the bank. Furious, he went inside the bank, threatening to sever our business ties. To be honest, I was shocked that he went to that extent because I hadn't anticipated it. But after Mr. Smith begged my father, knowing the bank would collapse if we left, they came to a compromise. Stanley would lose his job, but our company would stay open. I was so repulsed that I chose to transfer my account from one bank to another and close it. Grandpa's estate was inherited by Grandma and Dad, who closed their personal accounts and relocated them. Grandma's account alone involved several tens of millions of dollars. Therefore, the bank lost a significant amount, even though it was merely a personal account. According to rumors, Stanley not only damaged the bank's reputation, but was also sued for damages for the losses he created after being sacked. I'm confident he got what he deserved because he ridiculed our values, humiliated us, and discriminated against consumers. I worried whether Grandpa was observing me, even though I couldn't show him my work attire in person. Were his work attire from heaven the same ones as his? He'd had said that I was a decent guy and a grandson to be proud of, so I had to make sure I lived up to that. Grandpa's photos always had him looking so good. I made the decision to live a proud life, both of my work and of myself, determined not to let these work clothes or Grandpa down.